If there's one thing I've learned over the past 6 months, it's that being a full-time employee is way different than being a college student. Now, I did make a video a few months back where I talked about the differences between being an intern and a full-time software engineer, but I wanted to make another video that was a little bit more general, but also talked about the huge transition between the mentality and the life of being a college student to working in industry. Because back when I was in college, I didn't really know what to expect after I graduated, when all you've ever known is going to school for 9 months of the year and maybe working over the summer. It's kind of hard to imagine transitioning into working for the next 40 years straight. And outside of the more obvious things about working, like starting to make money and not having to study or do homework, there's 4 main things I've noticed since transitioning from being a student into being an employee. There's a fundamental difference between a homework assignment that you hack together in a couple of days or a coding challenge that you do in an hour, and something that you're putting into production that will need to be supported for years, not only by you, but also by your current and future teammates. And as much as I'd like to be able to say that college prepares you so that when you enter industry, you're doing high quality work that's ready to be shipped, it doesn't. The problem lies in the fact that college can't effectively simulate the scale of industry in terms of size, complexity, and time. In a 16-week semester where you're completing homeworks every week for several classes, the assignments have to be small. Grading also generally has to be objective, points are awarded for end results and achieving specified behaviors, not the processes used to achieve those results. Projects also typically start from scratch, meaning that even a semester-long assignment can't come anywhere close to the project you jump into at your first job that's been in the works for the past 5 years. You're not making toy projects anymore or solving artificial problems that are designed to have a known correct answer. What you're working on might not have an obvious correct solution, and you also might not even know that it's the right answer once you find it. In the context of computer science, it can mean completely changing the way that you write your code to be either more efficient or easier to maintain, or just conforming to standards set by your team or your company. College students are generally pretty good at throwing things together quickly that work, or mostly work, and then throwing them away a week later and never using them again. Doing things the right way is definitely on a spectrum. It's not like you spend the first 3 months on the job doing everything wrong, and then someone flips a switch and you just do everything the correct way from there on out. But even for people who did pretty well in college and generally try to do things the right way, there's still a bit of a learning curve. When you're in college, you constantly have to dedicate a lot of time to learning, assuming you want to pass your classes, but all of that changes as soon as you enter industry. It's true that you'll do a lot of learning on the job, but there's a big difference between that and going out of your way to actually keep developing. In college, you cover a fairly wide breadth of topics, which helps you get exposed on a relatively shallow level to the different areas of your field. On the other hand, jobs hire you for a specific role, working on a team that generally deals with a certain set of tools, technologies, and problems. What that means is you'll see rapid development in certain areas. If you spend 40 hours a week working in one area, you'll naturally learn more about it than a college course can teach you, but it also means there's huge areas of your field that you'll barely touch anymore because it's just not a part of your job description. Which can be perfectly fine depending on who you are. If you're never planning on expanding into other areas of the field and you're perfectly content working in your current niche, then you probably don't really mind. But as someone who's interested in several different aspects of computer science that I don't really use in my day job, it's made me realize that I'm now responsible for figuring out which things I want to learn and then making the time for those specific things. When you no longer have tests or assignments or a degree to earn, at that point you're really just learning because you want to, and not because you have to. At this point, I'm assuming that most of the people watching this video probably know what imposter syndrome is, assuming you haven't already felt it in your own life. And for me, college was generally a process of starting out with a ton of imposter syndrome, and then it's slowly going away as I gained confidence and did well in my classes. Graduating from college is naturally quite a lot like graduating from high school, in that you're being thrown into this new environment, which unfortunately for a lot of people means the potential return of imposter syndrome. What I've discovered in the past 5 months since I made that video about becoming a full-time software engineer is that imposter syndrome is a non-linear experience. What this means is you'll have times when you're full of confidence because you picked something up faster than expected or you impressed your boss, and then 2 days later you'll feel like a complete fraud and you can't believe your company hired you in the first place. I generally feel like over the past 4 years of college, I gained a lot of confidence, and as a result, I don't get hit by imposter syndrome nearly as badly as I used to, but the reality is it still comes and goes, especially when things don't work out on the first try. Realistically, companies don't expect you to know everything when you graduate from college or not to make any mistakes, and I'm pretty sure that all of the worrying I've ever done about my job has been entirely in my head. Just don't be surprised if imposter syndrome starts sneaking up on you at your new job, especially anytime you're struggling with something, because it's totally normal and all you can really do is focus on doing your best. Speaking of stress, college and your job have completely different ways of assessing your performance, which creates a new dynamic in terms of figuring out whether or not you're doing enough or if you're falling behind. Without having that constant stream of grades from projects and tests and assignments, depending on where you're working, you might only have performance reviews a couple of times a year, or once a year, or never, which means you're gonna get a lot less feedback to use as a metric to figure out how you're doing. This isn't to say that your job won't give you any indication of your performance, but outside of official reviews, there's a shift from relying on easily measurable quantitative data in the form of grades to potentially more subjective and sporadic feedback from your coworkers and your manager. There's no direct translation from your boss saying you did a good job to a number or a letter, and you're also left to interpret what feedback, or a lack of feedback, means from different people. If you're lucky, you'll end up with a manager and coworkers who do a good job of striking that balance between being supportive and transparent, so they'll help you build your confidence, but they're also going to be honest with you about your current performance. After all, no one wants to be constantly chewed out, but you also don't want to be told that you're doing a great job, only to find out one day that you're being fired because all this time no one was really being honest with you about your actual performance. The best thing you can do though is to focus on building strong lines of communication between you and people who have your best interests in mind, because not only will they give you good feedback, but they'll also help you develop and grow on the job. Alright, so there's a ton of things that I could have talked about here that I left out just to keep it from running long, so if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. Anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.